Welcome to the Creative Ticket podcast, brought to you by Pacific Video. I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which this podcast has been originally created, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people listening today. I am Geraldo Rodriguez, Sydney-based actor, writer, and director, and on this podcast I'll talk to artists from all over the world about their craft, their careers, inspirations, and insights. If you are an arts fanatic like myself, make sure to follow and subscribe so you won't miss out on new episodes. Kenn Ross is a performer, dancer, and choreographer, and he has been performing on stage since his teenage years. You might have seen him in Tenders, a circus cabaret show that did a successful run at the Sydney Fringe Festival, and also in Melbourne. You might have also seen him on the cabaret show Miss Piggy as Kenny Sais Quoi. Welcome to the Creative Ticket, Kenn. It is an honor to have you on the show.
Wow. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Oh, Kenn, I remember when we first met. We met in an audition. I'm not sure if you remember that. For the Jurassic World Puppeteers. So I remember you went into the audition room, you did your audition, and you came out and you said to me, hey, it's easy. You have to say your lines, but then they'll interrupt you as if they were a child that was asking questions about a dinosaur, and you have to go along with it. And I thought, wow, this is a very nice person, because we're auditioning probably for the same roles, and he's helping me out. Kenn, have you always been the kindest person around?
No. Actually, in terms of kindness, yes, naturally, I always do that. I guess in auditioning, it's a different setting. I don't particularly enjoy... No, I enjoy auditioning. I don't enjoy the thoughts that put doubt into your head, if that makes sense. So, it's like, even though we're competing for similar roles, you were friendly. You remember a lot more of the audition than I do. I did it last minute. I just remember saying hi to people, being friendly. We'll see what happens. And as you know, we've stayed close friends. But yeah, I guess when it comes to auditioning, I try not to be too critical. And I just try to treat it, we could come from all different backgrounds, all different success and achievements, but we're here auditioning for the same role. Let's go, do our best, carry on. And you never know where it leads you next time, So I think we were lucky that we had a group of people that, did make it in and stayed fairly close with a bunch of them. I think a lot of people in our group really vibe the same energy. So yeah, you remember a lot of that. I'm very impressed that you remember that audition.
I do remember that audition. I do. I was very excited about it. I had worked a little bit with puppet, but not especially as a puppeteer. Have you had any puppeteering experiences before?
Ooh, that was my first time, and it was very exciting. It's different, isn't it? Like, that's the whole thing about being a creative and creating magic on stage, like, you kind of learn these skills and you're like, oh, I'm a puppeteer, so I know how the mouth will move, and you think you're too cool for it. But the minute you put the puppet on and you see it moving, suddenly for me personally, I believe in the fantasy. Like, I'm so easily fooled by tricks. I'm like, oh, that is a baby I'm holding. I'm going to take care of the baby, but I know it's just my hand inside. So that was my first experience with it, but it always impresses me that people believe this one way or the other.
Yeah, me too. It's a magic trick.
Mm-hmm.
Kenn, recently you did the performance of Kenny Sais Quoi at Miss Piggy's Variety Night, which was at the same time brilliant, seductive, sensitive, charming, funny, how do you come up with a character, and how do you come up with a routine for a cabaret show?
First of all, thank you for your support and for being there and offering yourself and your services to it. That means a lot to Demon. And yeah, just thank you for being a fabulous friend. I know I haven't said that enough. It's just having you there was a great help, and you're a massive supporter of the arts. But yes, you got to see the debut of something that's been in your head for so long that you finally put out into the world. So that was my first introduction as a performer in burlesque. I took a 4-week course with Demon and to understand. So it wasn't a course of introducing yourself to burlesque. It was a course saying, well, clean up your act. So you present an idea and Demon helps you finesse and fully build the act from ground up. And I think that's my biggest need at that point in time, is someone to guide me. So, I came to a thought in my head of using pop culture references that I know. And how did I start that particular act? There was 2 songs. Oh, this one in particular came from the final song itself, is because the lyrics say, welcome to my ass class, like welcome to class. So I was like, class, teaching, what's teaching, pa 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 pa, what can I put into that? That's where that one started from, and then it was really about trusting my gut. There was so many versions of it that didn't make that final, that there was so many versions it had to go through to be the one that I presented on the showcase night. But again, it was with the guidance of Demon saying that audio track isn't really reading to the audience, or it's not making sense as a storyline, or pushing yourself further. Like the coat that I had on, baby, when I tell you that coat I made and I bought the pins and I put them on. When I first came to her, there was no pins, nothing on the coat. And I was like, I'm wearing this. And she said, are you going to dress it up? I'm like, no, it's what it is. She said, no, you'll find pins, use earrings, use badges. You will put stuff on there. So yeah, that's like the inspiration for that. Started out as a lyric in the song. And then as the idea grew, I picked out different influences from the advice that Demon gave me, references that I've known and really enjoyed. Yeah.
And when you say it's not a story, or we're not reading the story, how much of a script, or how much of different beats that you have to go through in order to create an act?
The limit is endless, I would say, but there is a danger to that. So when I said it wasn't reading as a narrative in what I originally wanted, the idea for that started as, there's a new girl in school or a new person in school, and then it changed to someone on their way to school, so taking public transport and doing this. And I had audio tracks from popular TV shows and like online audio clips that I put in and tried to make a narrative out of, where someone's like, who's the new girl? I don't know who she is. And it didn't flow well like it did in that final piece, because Gossip Girl, the TV show, was a big influence of this. And so I used the opening track, but then there were very specific interviews that the cast did that I was hoping to use the clips on, but the audio didn't mix well throughout the overall track. And even as a narrative, it just was like, it didn't flow. It like stopped it and then it picked it up again, stopped it, picked it up again. So it just had to be, it needed the finessing.
I see. And when, for instance, comparing Tender with Miss Piggy's variety show, because also in Tender you had pieces, acts where you were interacting with people and you had your own solo. How do you feel performing solo compared to how you feel performing with other people?
Oh, I think being on stage, there's a thrill that changes you and gives you this specific sort of, well, for me, it's like once I'm on stage, that's it, like it's there. How do I feel about it, Geraldo? Exhilarating, I think is the word. It's It's once you're there, it's especially with live theater, one night is never going to be the same as the other night, you know? So in Tender, I think the cast was really welcoming, and they had this really strong idea of what the show needs to be and the message they want to give to the audience. So that show can be very sexy and risque, but a lot of the sexiness part when we're close with each other, when we're holding each other, the sexiest part about it is the consent, not just someone's pulling your hair and, biting your neck. Like, that's all very sexy from the audience perspective and this closeness that the cast has. But for me, being on stage, the sexiest part is that this person who's holding me and I'm holding them, we said, that's okay, I trust you. That's the sexiest part of that. And building that was really lovely, So when we did the run in Tender in Sydney Fringe versus Melbourne during their Midsummer Festival this year, the stage was different. So things had to be staged differently again. And we had to rework some pieces to make those moments a little bit more intimate or make them louder. I think there was less the opportunity for audience interaction in Melbourne. Whereas Sydney Fringe was in the round, I could walk through the audience and be a little bit like, and yeah.
When you're performing, either Tender or Miss Piggy's, when you're performing in a circus act or in a burlesque act, is it more sort of a character, a persona, or is it just Kenn in a different energy to his day-to-day energy?
The second one, I'd say it's still me, but it's, it gives me the permission to be everything I wanted to be, I always say performing, especially dancing, is how I make sense of the world. Like, it doesn't have to be like what drives you to dance. It just is. It just is. That's what makes sense to me, whether it's taking a class, whether it's performing a piece that I've practiced in a group or whatever it may be. And so I guess performing in any capacity, be it Kenny Sais Quoi, be it part of anything, it frees me to be that person that outside of everything else, outside of all my responsibilities, that's me. It's not about all the follows, all the likes. It's not about the social media posts. There's a moment in every time I've performed that there's that sense of, wow, this makes sense. I am balanced with everything around me. Whatever, for that 3-4 minutes, hour, whatever it is, I'm this person. I am who I'm always meant to be. So that means for me embracing masculinity, femininity, like, bringing with me any lived experience and sharing that to the world, and whatever people take from it, they take from it, So I guess, yeah, so ultimately it's me. Anytime I've done dance showcases with studios, I think in the moment, I'm not thinking about it. I'm there doing my dance, showing my training, showing the skills I've done. And then I've had family and friends come up to me, say things like, oh, it's so nice to be represented, and seeing like a Filipino up there be a bit more feminine, or just being Filipino on stage. Like, my husband never did that. And while that's all very nice to receive as compliments, to be like, wow, someone saw representation in me, ultimately I was a bit selfish. I was doing it for myself without any intention of having that consequence to the world, but being authentically myself and having that received back because someone saw themselves there is really, really lovely when you're being so the truest version of yourself. That said, there will be characters like Kenny as the schoolgirl, and I'm building other things in my head that will hopefully be released into the world as different versions of Kenny. I like to think of myself a little bit cheesy, like the Ken doll, but there's different versions of the Ken doll. So we got Ken doll the schoolgirl. Maybe we'll get another version on stage somewhere else.
And you said something very interesting. Sometimes people will say, hey, it was nice being able to see a Filipino artist, because I don't get to see that so often as I wanted to. And you said, hey, thanks, that's nice to hear, but I'm doing it for myself. At the same time, is there a sense of, or is there a conscience and awareness that you are representing a culture, a country, an ethnicity, or more than just yourself? Do you carry that responsibility when you produce art, when you perform?
I am trying to be more conscious about it, that it's when I'm making something, I don't look like what's around me a lot of the times. And that's just what it is, being in this world that we live in, you know, like, especially in so-called Sydney, Australia, I'm not what I see a lot on stage, which is fine. Like, but what it means is I do have this, I need to make art with that in mind, not as a insecurity of like, why don't I look like everyone else? But like, it's because I don't look like everyone that it makes me special, you know? And like, it's not validation when I heard comment like that from people. It was just like, normally I'm the one saying that to other artists, and it's nice to have it brought back to me. So yeah, anything I try to make now, I guess, will always have a sort of lens of who am I, what's my history, what's my influences, am I doing it in a respectful way? And however an audience perceives that moving forward, that's, I can't control it, you know, but there will always be this authentic self of who I am and where I'm coming from, especially, sorry, I'm going to bring it back to the performance course again with Demon and Clean Up Your Act. My gosh, the way the brain works when you look beyond what society's given you, you know, the challenge is, why are you doing it to the beauty standard of this white ethnocentric standard? Why don't you bring in your culture? And suddenly there's this different beauty that you don't think about, because this whole time you've been looking at it from how you were raised, what your expectations are versus the beauty that you already have. I'm not being too specific about this because it was someone else's piece, but it was, it was just a really lovely experience to hear that, because they wanted to do this version of what they knew, I guess, burlesque to be, and they wanted to do it in a really classical way, but bring their culture into it. And they were challenged by going, that you're trying to fit their standards without actually acknowledging your culture. Why don't you see what your culture looks like and switch it? And like, that moment flipped my head, like, whoa, what can my culture bring? What is this beauty that people haven't seen yet? So yeah, it's always going to be in my mind that I have a story, and it's very based in food and the street culture of the Philippines.
And you mentioned this particular piece that you saw that inspired you, but how do you build that awareness? Was that like an insight thing, or was it like you were slowly building that awareness of the beauty of who you are?
Years and years of like learning how to self-love and pushing past that, you know, it's building my awareness of who I am and what that means. So I started to practice as a joke initially when I was working overseas. I'd look in the mirror and kind of be like, you look good. Yeah. And it first started as a joke with my roommate, but then when you start building that habit, and then suddenly it's just normal for you to accept that and start believing that sort of started building the confidence in seeing who I am. So, and what my history is, you know, like, I come from a culture where, you know, white skin is very much praised and a sense of cleanliness. So I grew up with you know, people saying you should whiten your skin and you should be more like this and clean your skin and make it lighter, blah, 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 blah. So you use all the whitening products, which is very popular in Asia. And then it sort of slowly, I suppose, I'm very privileged to where I am now in terms of my education and having that curious mind of going, well, what else is out there beyond that? And I started listening to spoken word and just understanding different perspectives that weren't white. And then suddenly seeing the beauty in the Filipino culture before colonialism, and I've just seen such beautiful examples of what could have been and who we were beforehand, that where can I how can I platform that into my art, and it's still my brain has this balance of, am I using my culture for gain? Am I honoring it correctly? Or how am I also contributing to a country that's not very prosperous? It's a bigger picture than just taking this one aspect of my history, making it look modern. How am I going to impact that into the overall culture, which is such a big question that I want to be able to answer at one point.
That's so interesting, Ken. And what do you say? We've had this chat before, and we've compared a few traces of Brazilian culture with traces of Filipino culture, which were pretty similar in its creativity, in its warmth, its passion. But what would you say is the spirit of the Filipino culture that you bring with you?
Oh, that I bring with me. I'd say a sense of joy. Like, I think ultimately it's this sense of, we call it harot, which means cheeky. Like this, like that's, like, I always think like any class, any whatever level you are in the Philippines, no matter if you're rich or if you've got a lot of things, you've got no things, there's always this sense of like humor to it that it won't go away. And I think I always try to bring that with me, outside of everything else. Like, there's community, yes, but I think there's just this inherent like need to joke or find the funny. And it's hard to describe, but you would understand having bilingual jokes that work both in your language as well as English, and it makes sense when you have it with someone else. Like, that's I think quintessential Filipino humor. Like, every time the word for water is tubig in our language, and so we're like, how big is the ocean? Oh, it's too big. Because it's too big. It's like, you don't have to explain it. It's really silly jokes. Like, that kind of humor is what I think I bring, and is actually part of my culture that I always try to bring into any performance. Yeah.
And growing up in Australia, how do you feel like that also impacted you, or that contributed to how you see the world today?
How do I see the world today? I have been very lucky to see the Filipino migrant community grow in Australia. I think when my parents moved here, you always find your pockets of community. So I grew up amongst Filipinos, but we weren't family. But you saw each other every day. You spent the weekends with each other. So people your age became your cousins, and you have your birthdays together. And so it's almost like it's double-sided. I think I have a sense of guilt because I know how little people have back home, and I have all that I have here in Australia. And so I always try to think, how can I help that and be an example of what people can look up to? While at the same time, the community here has just grown, where I like, growing up, I thought my food was strange, the things I would eat, and my mom would, make me bring rice and adobo, which is a Filipino dish, to school. And you don't have a microwave in primary school, so you have to eat this cold, otherwise your mom gets upset while you eat it. But then your friends will be like, what's that weird smell? And they're having their Nutella and their Vegemite and their butter, and I'm like, oh, so you try to eat your food and try to like not be ashamed of it. And it's crazy to see now how accepted, how like cool, I guess, certain flavors of our culture is now accepted. It just blows my mind. Like, and I'm very proud of the people who pioneered Filipino cuisine in, food trucks, having their own restaurants in Sydney is just amazing to me, because I don't think I saw that growing up short of family gatherings.
I see. Interesting. And I've tried the Filipino cuisine in your birthday, which was an experience in itself. Um, and I felt, for me, that experience was like not just immersing ourselves in Filipino culture, but receiving a sort of a gift, because I felt like the whole experience wasn't just about eating the food; it was about sharing, because of the way it's served, the way you choose to eat, the abundance of food. There was food there for that we brought it with us home and ate for a couple of days after the party. So it was like, and I was listening to this person say one day that the sense of community in the Philippines is so strong. It's one of the strongest in the world, and I felt like, yeah, that's absolutely true. I felt like that even for just an hour or two, by sharing the food with you and your family and friends on your birthday.
I'm glad that was my whole intention. And similar to like bring it back to performance and things like that. Like I'm glad you felt that community because it's we don't you don't make food for two people when you come from a culture like mine. You make it for your family, which could mean 10 to 15 people, minimum. But with that said, there's this sense of community that goes beyond the present time we live in. There's this concept of, carrying your ancestors with you or standing on the shoulders of giants that came before you. I try to now always bring that consciousness to mind. I saw this beautifully tragic story that I want to bring to life at some point of this Filipino native that people call the Prince of Snakes, I believe, because they saw him painted up and they thought the tattoos were would ward snakes away from him. I think I told you this before. And when I saw this drawing of him, I'm going, whoa, this is me in the way I've never seen before. The person had the long hair and slightly feminine features, and it was very different to everything presented to me. And suddenly it took me back to a moment beyond any colonization that I've seen, which ironically, that picture came from colonizers. But I was like, this existed before anything else of what was written, and this is someone's interpretation of it. And what's really sad about that story is he was taken to the UK, made, shown off, and then when he died, they skinned him for his tattoos, and they didn't preserve it. So like he literally doesn't exist anymore. This like person only exists in this picture, and it just kills me that like the idea of what could have been. So anytime I think of community, I think of this one picture, and I cannot remember the name right now, which is, I promise, they called him Prince something. It's Prince, and it's beyond my head. But he was just a native. I don't think he was royalty specifically. And so I always bring that energy with me. This person who stood there in a loincloth, in the tattoos, long hair, one earring. I'm like, that is my culture. That is something that came from where I'm from. And it's a bold claim because I don't know how linked I am to that region of the Philippines directly, but it's more that I saw this actual representation of me in my culture, not influenced by an expectation or a stereotype of today's image. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And do you find that that's a generational, not just curiosity, but a generational search, the search for who my culture was before colonization, who my culture was originally?
Generational. I think so. But I also would like to say it's always been there, this constant yearning for your culture. It's always been there. People just don't know how to find and look for it. But you've got to, because, I have family. My sister, I don't think is as deeply into this as I am, and it's got to do with unlearning everything you know and then wanting to go further than that. Would I say it's generational? I couldn't tell you, because there's just so much out there, that I'd like to think someone has always wanted to preserve the culture one way or the other, throughout history, that it wasn't, and a lot of our culture is oral, is not written down. So it's, and especially, I guess, with this day and age, with technology and what's available to us literally at our fingertips, people are finding those answers, especially in this generation. But I'd like to think somewhere in the 80s and 70s, people were thinking about this before the Americans, the Japanese, the Spanish. They were trying to preserve this culture, or a culture. Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. Ken, going back a little bit to your career, into your artistry, to your artisany, do you separate what is your creative process to what is your career as a performer? Do you think about in terms of a career, or do you think, or you focus more on the craft and let the career happen by itself?
The second one, definitely. At where I am now, I think when I was younger, I always thought dancing was the only way to do something. There's only one road for me. This is what it is. There's only one way, dancer or nothing. And I think I shut myself out for being so like, I only want to train as a dancer. And I have a rigidity when I want a goal that inhibits me from wanting anything else. And I think it stops other opportunities. So when I started my aerial journey, and there's still a long way to go on that, I that came from dancing. I said, like, I've never wanted to be the celebrity or the pop star. I always looked at their backup dancers. So actually, two things. In the track of the burlesque variety showcase, I got to use a piece of live audio from a Britney Spears concert track, and some of the names that the audio says are the names of her backup dancers that I've always looked up to. And I almost didn't use that audio in the initial version. And then when I got the feedback from Demon, you know what, let's use the audio, and it worked so much better. So, so I always have always been inspired by backup dancers more than anything. My eyes would always go to them during any concerts I've seen. And the point is whereas instead of just letting that dancer one mind track, I looked at dancers from Pink, her tours, who were also dancers in aerials. And then I started going, how can I incorporate the two? So I started this aerial journey, and I started focusing on the craft and letting the career become what it is. Because we're not just a dancer. You're not just an actor. You're 100 other things that make the one performance that people see, So I'm the same way. Like, burlesque has opened me up to learning how to make tracks, finding those inspiration, learning how to sew. But you need these skills. So yeah, I think to your question, it's more about the craft, understanding that, and then letting the work define your career. Let people call you the performer, let people call you the actor. And that, what I've known is I've been practicing a craft.
And do you take, for instance, when you were performing in Tanda, you did an aerial number. You had an act. It was a different, let's say, a different technique to what you're used to before. Mm-hmm. How do you develop a new technique? Is it easy for you, or is it a struggle, or is it just something to do with passion because that's what you're interested in showcasing for that particular new performance?
That was very much built on the existing cast, and they were very much nurturing in their guidance to me. But I guess for me, it is a passion. It's finding out where you can push yourself, how you can push yourself into a performance. My struggle with aerial and performing is that it's so different to dance. I've got so many hesitations with aerials. because I thought, oh, pretty movements in the sky. I can do that because I can dance. And then suddenly your center of gravity shifts. Where you're looking up is actually down, and where you're looking to the side doesn't matter because you're spinning around. And it was this challenge for me to go, whoa, I need to readjust, recalibrate my center and how I'm performing, and then make it a performance. It was a lot of hurdles for myself, and I'm getting to this point where I'm more comfortable in it. But yeah, it's about that consistency and training it. And for me, I don't like to think I have much of an ego. I perform and people take from it what they will. So even with aerials, I'm like, I survived. I did it. People enjoyed it. I'm great. I'm happy. I could always do better. Or I did really well. Those are my two things. Where can I be better? Did I do well? Beyond that, however people take it, if there's compliments and feedback, I'll take it all on board. But I never hate something or practice something with the expectation of compliments or accolades. So yeah, it's been quite the journey learning aerials and having to stick to one craft specifically. Like, you're not singing or voice acting all at the same time. I'm like, I need to choose the one. And I think trapeze is the one that I always come back to, whereas the other silks and lyro, those are beautiful and I love them. I think there's something about trapeze specifically that I'm like, this is what I really enjoy. Yeah.
And have you always been like that? Has the ego sometimes tripped you, or have you always had that same approach? Hey, I learn, and that's what it's all about.
Has the ego tripped me? Absolutely, 100%. So many times I've overthought things. I almost wasn't a part of Tender. I didn't tell you this.
No.
They put out an expression of interest, and they did a call out, and I saw it, and I said thank you to the. I wish them luck. They're my friends. I said good luck in finding a performer, and they said you should fill out the form, and I said absolutely. I have extreme performance anxiety right now. I'm not at a level that your show is. I learn from all of you. I'm not ready. I'm not there. Thank you for considering me and suggesting I fill out the form. I'm okay. And then they came back to me a second time and said, no, please, we would really appreciate it. I think you should fill out the form. And so they've convinced me to fill out the form, and they went through all the applications, and then I went through the discussions with them. But hesitation the whole way through. I was like, don't call me. I filled out the form. I'm not ready. And at the end, that was my ego saying I wasn't ready. And by the time I got on stage, I think it was almost like what were you worried about? I'm constantly worried, but everyone was so supportive and had that belief in me. But my own brain was like, no, you can't do this. You're not ready. All those thoughts. So I almost wasn't there. But I'm glad I did. I'm glad they pushed me, and I'm just grateful for everyone's patience with me for seeing something I don't oftentimes. Yeah.
That's brilliant. That's amazing, Kenn. Kenn, I have one last question that I'd like to ask you. And that's a question that I ask all of my guests here on the Creative Ticket. And the question is, what makes you, you?
What makes me me? Wow. God, I don't know. You could say there's a certain je ne sais quoi about me that I'm still trying to figure out. I guess my overall curiosity is what makes me me. I've always wanting to learn something and create from that curiosity, that is ultimately what makes me me. This burlesque journey I'm going on, what is this art form that makes people clap and applaud when people take their clothes off? And, why is there a joy in that? And I think there's an act developing in my brain of literally stripping back colonialism. And I think I can make something from that in celebrating the ancestry that exists in my culture. But it's this constant questioning of what does that look like? What will it look like? Where is the influence? It's these questions, is these answers. it's curiosity and joy is what makes me me. Those are the two things, if you want to keep it simple. Finding the funny is always something I will always try to do, because, you just need laughter. We all do, at any point. Yeah, curiosity and joy. Those are the two things that make me me.
That's lovely. And I think that what also makes you you is your incredible generosity and your kindness.
Now, wait a minute. You and I can't talk about generosity because you've been far too generous to me. Multiple times
Okay,
you've gone out.
stop it, stop it. Thank you so much for being on the Creative Ticket. It was wonderful talking to you, Ken.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to hear it. And everyone should listen to you. It's great. It's great. You have such amazing guests.
Thank you.
Yeah, always.
I will keep recording just to check if there is something else I wanted to ask you, if that's all right, if we have a couple more minutes.
Yeah, that's so fine.
Okay,
That is
great.
fine.
My next question then is, do you have a process that you go through every time you have a new performance scheduled? Or do you draw, is there a specific thing that inspires you to a new project?
There's not a specific. Ask the question again. Sorry.
If there is a process that you go through every time you have a performance scheduled.
Yeah, there is. It's very loose, but I think ultimately I'll take a prompt of a word or a theme, and then I'll see. It's almost like improv, where I go, what is my first response to this prompt, and then what can I build from there, and then that's an incredible mind map journey. Like I'm currently in the process of my current prompts for myself. Like I don't have any. Just to constantly build that creative juice is like I'm building prompts based on color. So I'm like, red. What is red to me? What does that mean? Where can I take it? How is this going to be an act? Is there a song that screams red to me? Is there a song that is blue to me? And what is that vibe or feeling? But I always start at a prompt. Like I saw an amazing burlesque show recently where they said, it was called Porcelain Pet Palace by Porcelain Alice. So she had a bunch of different performers, but all the performances had to be inspired by an animal. So I watched someone dressed up as a cow sing opera. I had two people do a number as horses. I had someone else do a number as a snail. And then as I'm watching in the crowd and I'm taking in all this art, I'm like, what would I do if I was an animal? And I'm just there being like, what would my song be? What would the thing be? So it's all, I always try to start from a prompt.
Cool. And I think you answered both questions in just one answer.
Oh no, I'm sorry.
And is there a moment in your process where you feel, yeah, that's it. I've reached where I could get and this is it. I'm not going any further than this. Or is it changing up to the last performance?
I will always reach a point of, this is great. This is where we want this performance to be at. But it always, where can I go to the next evolution of this? So even just everything, it's like, what is the next version? Can we push this to? Can we make it better? Can we make it more interesting? So, but I do think there's a level I'll reach, but I don't want to ever stop there. Like the schoolgirl act is already evolving into slightly different. One day that might look a little different. Yeah.
And do you see any differences between Ken as a teenage dancer and Ken as the dancer he is today?
Oh my goodness. Yes. Teenage Ken was straight, was into his hip hop, good Catholic raised boy who, yeah, it was the biggest difference, you know. In the closet, I had to, you know, convince my mom to let me take dance classes because dance wasn't seen as a viable career, you know, and it should only be a hobby. And like, if I could like just convince them to let me take one dance class, that was it. And I had so like, what's crazy is some of those dance classes that I took as a teenager, I didn't realize I've become friends with those teachers. I didn't know who they were at that point, and now we're good friends. But yeah, it was just this one little studio in Parramatta that no longer exists by the train station. On a Saturday, I would go for my 2 hours, and that my inspirations were very much the dance movies. I don't know if you watched a lot of them, like I can't even think of their names, and they're supposed to be my biggest inspirations. Big dance movies of the early 2000s. I'll leave it at that. Like Step Up, all of that, but there's more beforehand. And I guess my influences were very straight as a teenager. And then exploring that as to who I am now is wildly different, you know, and I think who I am now could be a rebellion or an answer to who I was trying to be. Like, I never had long hair growing up. I only started growing that in the last 5 years, and it's just, is that an answer to that? Yeah, wildly different person, but grateful for both versions of myself.
And are there any similarities between Kenn from back then and Kenn today?
Yeah, I think my origins will always be as someone who loves and inherently goes to a hip hop groove in my performance and rhythm. It's just something that sticks in me. So it's actually quite funny when I tap into that energy of hip hop or like hip hop grooves, and people see me and go, "You dance so masculine." I'm like, "Oh, this is home for my body. This feels so nice to me." There's absolutely similarities to that. And yeah, I think that's probably the biggest one. I remember I did a hip hop showcase maybe 4 years ago, and I didn't do any of the high heels. I didn't have my hair out, like what people know me for now. And kind of some of the dance teachers were like, "You look straight." I'm like, "But I enjoy this. Is still me." Like, yeah. Even this, like, I feel very... I don't mean to.
Amazing. Amazing.
Yes.
I think that's it.
Yeah?
Thank you for listening to the Creative Ticket podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please remember to share this with your friends and family and subscribe so you can stay up to date with new episodes. Feel free to reach out to hello@pacificvideo.com.au for feedback and suggestions. We would love to hear from you. Take care